There's a program, the prototype of I've been using for a while now, and you might have seen it in my videos and streams. It's this part of my shell prompt. What it actually means is just the git status of the current directory. I have unstaged changes in the A file, and also I staged some modifications in there, and also the B file is unstaged, so it's a new file that I haven't git added yet. Now, to be fair, if I want to see the actual files and what changes are on which one, I'll always just run git status, but it's very convenient to be able to see the summary of all of the git changes in the current directory at a glance, without actually having to run any specific command. I said it was a prototype, and it was, but recently on stream, I actually finished the program to an extent where you can now easily use it. First of all, you would have to cargo install, and here's the kicker. Octussy is the name of the program. Yes, it means exactly what you think it is. I use binstall here because by all accounts it should be supported, but by default you would cargo install. Binstall is a cargo program that you can use that will take compiled binaries from the GitHub page if they are there, instead of compiling from source. Unnecessary, but kinda cool. The way Octussy stands out is obviously by its name, lmao and even lol, but more so is that it doesn't override your prompt. Maybe you have already written your prompt in fish, for example, or however you actually did it. Octussy, all it does is print this output to stdout, and then you get to decide how you use it, how you put it in your prompt, or maybe anything else. For example, I have a function called GSA that checks the git status of my most often used git directories, and it actually uses Octussy to display that git status, because I don't actually need the entire git status, I just want to see the summary of it. And that's where you can use Octussy. You just go to a directory in terms of a script thing, and then use Octussy there, and here you go. So it doesn't really need to be a part of your prompt. It's something that you can use wherever. Now, it doesn't actually look like this by default, because it would use different colors. I configured it to my liking with the colors that I wanted to use, and then added it to my shell prompt like this. So how you do this is up to you to decide. If you use fish, you would somewhere add a call to Octussy in fish prompt, but if you use something like bash or z shell, I have no clue. I've never tried to make my own shell prompt in those, so that's going to be up to you to decide. But the default Octussy will just follow the colors from your color scheme. And if you use the test flag, you can see what it would look like if all the elements were at least one. Not sure how I'm saying at least, if all the elements were exactly one. And you can see that by default it uses some weird symbols. To render those symbols correctly, you would have to use a nerd font. But what if you don't want to or can't for some reason? Well then, you can use the ashi symbols flag, which will use ashi defaults. And the cool thing about Octussy is that there are flags to recolor everything and to change every single symbol. And that is exactly what I do. And that's how it looks this way, is because I recolored every category. About categories, you can clearly see 3 different colors here. That is not by mistake. So all of these are unstaged changes, these are staged changes, and this is the commit information. More specifically, how many commits you haven't yet pushed. What I also want to implement, and it should exist in the future, maybe by the time you are watching this video, it already exists in the program. On the left, it will be how many commits you haven't yet pulled. So the default for staged changes is green, for unstaged cyan, but you can change the default for a category yourself, like I do here by color-all-staged and then color-all-unstaged. What's even cooler then is that you can set the color for a category and then maybe decide to specifically recolor staged deletions if you want to, or unstaged deletions, and maybe change the symbol for staged deletions, so it's not the same as unstaged deletions. It's literally up to you. You can recolor everything and change every single symbol to what you want it to look like. What you're going to be able to do in the future is also decide which elements you don't care about. Now, keep in mind, if this feature already exists, the way it works is that if you remove the staged deletions element, for example, it will not get moved into all staged modifications or whatever. No, it will just be gone. Maybe you really don't care about it. You could remove unpushed commits in case you don't particularly care. Now, keep in mind, testicles here, which I know is hilarious, it has a commit that's not pushed, but it's not shown currently because testicles does not have a remote. So if you have commits but have no remotes, don't worry, it will not get displayed because you can't push it, at least not yet. YouTube videos tend to get outdated very, very quick. I've noticed this a lot in my YouTube quote-unquote career. So what you should really do is install Octussy for yourself and read the help page, which will contain the explanation for everything. And naturally, you can read the README of the project, which naturally I'm going to leave a link to in the description. The README then explains everything in more detail that I'm currently explaining now, and obviously will reflect every change that's going to be made in the project in the future. Now, the real question is, why did I make this project? I mean, something like Starship already exists, there's Tide for fish. Well, let me get into it. Tide is actually pretty slow, not in the way that it makes the prompt, but if you were to make another tab of fish, for example, it would get loaded up in like 2 seconds. At least on WSL, it was very fucking slow in trying to get to exist. And then once you get it working, it was incredibly fast, but the initial startup time was too bad for me. Then Starship, that one is just great. It's plenty fast. Well, it's also written in Rust, same as Octussy is, but it lacked something. It lacked the ability to just grab things from my fish environment. For example, if I go to fish private mode, I now have this symbol here, which is very convenient. You know what isn't convenient? The fact that the variable that tells us whether we are in private mode or not is not an environment variable, so I can't just grab it. And it's pretty difficult to see how I could integrate it into Starship. My answer was I can't, which is why I rewrote my entire shell prompt in fish. You can see here in prompt.fish, a file that I have and will link to in the description, just does my entire shell prompt in fish, in a way simplifying the process, because now if I ever need to set up my system again on a different computer or when reinstalling, I don't need a dependency for my entire shell prompt, which if it doesn't work may break some things. No, it's just written in fish, so it's one less dependency. And then if it exists, not as the command-q, there's also a git status, which I think is a pretty huge difference. Now, Octussy is kinda recent. The benefit of Tide is that it's asynchronous. So even if git status took way too long to load up, that wasn't really an issue because it loaded up that information asynchronously. Starship cannot do that, but the overall speed of it was so good that I was like, fine, whatever, let's just use it, and I discarded having git status in my prompt. Surprisingly enough, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but regardless, when I switched to Linux from WSL, everything sped up massively. Now when I open my shell or my terminal, everything is immediate. I press enter, it's literally as fast as I can see, pretty much. And I was like, oh wow, holy shit. But what if git status can now work for me? And that's why I decided to write Octussy. Spoiler, it does work for me. It does not change how slow or how fast it takes. It's literally as fast/slow as it is without it. So that's amazing. Literally could not see a difference. So now I get to have a no dependencies shell prompt for my fish shell, which also has a git status if I do have Octussy, making my setup the best for me. And maybe I'm not the only person who wants this kind of behavior. Maybe you too want a git status while still writing the rest of your shell prompt in your own way. And that's where Octussy comes in. You can just plop it in to your existing setup and just have git status. All the parsing is done for you, so on. Isn't that nice? So, once again, if you want it, go install Octussy and tell about it to all your friends. Surely they'll appreciate the amazing name. And if you enjoyed the video, consider following me on Mastodon. Press a like, type some comment, maybe have a question or suggestion. Definitely subscribe so you don't miss my content, but most importantly, stay fresh, cheese bags. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye bye!